let's get into this Korn album. So we are going over the Korn self-titled album, which was their first album. It came out on October 11th, 1994. So you're going to be hearing this episode, I mean, depending on when you listen to it, but if you listen to it when we release it, which will probably be on October 1st, you're basically hearing it at the 25th anniversary of this record. So yeah, it came out October 11th, 1994. It was recorded in Malibu, California. It was produced by Ross Robinson. Last month when we did Significant Other, we looked at the chart position because it was crazy that Limp Bizkit was number one on the Billboard charts. And we looked at the other things that they were around. Korn, this album, never really great on the Billboard charts. It peaked at number 72 and didn't have like a big single or anything like that. And also the choices for the singles on this album are very strange, but we can get into that. But the album did end up selling 2.1 million copies in the United States and 10 million copies worldwide as of January 4th, 2013. And according to Wikipedia, this is the album that is considered to have started the nu metal genre. So it's a big album. It's a touchstone album. I think you and I talked about, what album to do first. We wanted to do Significant Other first because we felt like that was the sort of peak of nu metal. And I think this album is sort of the start of nu metal. So, kind of anytime you're going to be doing a nu metal podcast, if you're doing 2 episodes first, you're probably doing Korn and Limp Bizkit. And so we're getting into Korn today. So it was a longevity play. This was the album that launched Korn, but it wasn't like they were huge right away. People weren't clamoring for the debut album. Now, I want to start because last time we were going to talk about the album art of Significant Other, because art and the way that, music videos were directed for these bands and the way that the bands presented themselves were such a huge part of it. But we had so much to get to with our own nu metal history last time. Before we get into our own history with the Korn album, let's just talk a little bit about the album art because it's fucked up.
I think it's cool. Like, I remember even back at the time being like, wow, this is fucking cool. This is dark shit. Because like every heavy metal album, like basically heavy metal to me before Korn was Pantera, and like, Vulgar Display of Power is a fist punching a guy in the face, and like Far Beyond Driven is a skull with a with a screw going through it, and it's like all black and dark, and like the Korn album cover is very dark. But yes. I was so drawn to it. It's like a movie to me. I look at that thing and I think it's like a movie for some reason.
Yeah, no, it looks cool. But here's the thing. Like, so I got this album, back when I started listening to nu metal in like 97, 98. And I never noticed this until today when I was doing research for this album. Not only does it look like there's like a shadow of like, it looks like a tall man that's maybe holding like some knives. It looks like he's stalking this little girl on a playground swing. All of that's very obvious, but here's something I never noticed before. The girl's shadow is shot in such a way that it looks like she's hanging from the letter K.
That's sick.
I never noticed that before.
Behavior.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Like and then I was like, oh man, this is even more twisted than I thought.
Did they do that on purpose?
Yeah, they did. Because it says right in the Wikipedia page, which is the most trusted source. The album cover depicts a young girl being approached by a large man who is holding what appears to be horseshoes or possibly blades. Furthermore, the girl's shadow gives the appearance that her body is being hanged due to the position of the band's logo.
I see it now. I'm looking at it now, and it does look like she's being hanged by the K. Korn.
Isn't that crazy?
I think great.
The thing I kind of like about this, and we're going to talk so much about this when we talk about the lyrics and stuff of this record, like this album cover just would not happen today, I don't think, or at least not for a mainstream band. Like maybe if you're kind of like, a death metal band or whatever, I feel like people are just like, yeah, whatever. They're all burning churches and killing each other. Like who gives a shit? But like, if this was like a mainstream album cover, like people would lose their fucking mind.
I guess, yes. Now that we live in like Joker times where people are like afraid of a movie, right. I think you're probably, I would have disagreed with you like a month ago where it's like, people understand, it's art, it's fake or whatever. But now I'm like, no, people would be like, oh shit, this Korn album's scary as hell. Should we release it? Should the army be at the CD store when we, when it comes out? I don't know.
The National Guard.
Yeah.
It's funny to me because in Canada, the only time you ever hear of like the army being called in for something is like a snowstorm. Like if there's like a really, really brutal snowstorm, the like local government can dispatch the army to like help clear the streets and sidewalks of snow. So they'll be like, yeah, we called up the National Guard and like 1,000 soldiers descended upon Toronto to like clear snow. So like when you're like, yeah, let's send the army to the record store, the first thing that just went through my mind was like, oh, is it snowing at the record store?
No, they're standing there with guns because the way that the way that we fix things here is we shoot it. And like it obviously that does something every time. Like there's at least a reaction to that, I guess. Yeah. I don't know.
Maybe we're just too far. I'm too far left. You know, I that's what Todd Phillips Todd McKay. What's the guy's name who directed Joker?
Todd Phillips. He's
Todd Phillips. Okay,
the old school guy.
Yeah. So he was like, he's blaming the Joker shit on the far left. So I guess seeing this Korn album cover, I'm just too far left, Brian. It makes me feel like it's not something that would be released today. But I will say, as like a debut album mission statement, like it's pretty cool. Like you see it and you really get what the music is. Like if you turned on the first song after seeing the album cover, you'd be like, yeah, this is exactly what I expected, which you don't get with every album cover. You know, a lot of them are pretty ambiguous. You wouldn't necessarily expect what you hear, but I feel like you hear the opening of Blind and then Jonathan Davis screams, "Are you ready?" And you're like, yeah, I'm ready to die. Like this girl died on the album cover. You're like, this is dope.
I think the thing about the cover and the music is that I think it painted the music in a different way to me too. The music has like the little hip hop like elements and stuff in it, and the cover wasn't black, I guess is what I'm saying. It was like a very bright cover of an album. So I don't know, it made it completely different from everything else that I had ever heard in my life. I mean, this album was really what made me like care about music. I didn't really care that much before this came out, and I think I got it in April 1995. I don't know why I remember, but I got it in April of 1995, and I didn't stop listening to it. I just would not stop listening to it for probably 2 years.
So what's so let's get into the history. We've covered the album art. So let's get into our personal history with the album. You're touching on it a little bit there. So what kind of drew you to it? Because I know on episode 1, you were talking about how, you know, at your school, you pretty much had to listen to rap music or you were lame and people hated you. So like what kind of drew you to Korn and made it be like the first band that you cared about? What was your history with discovering this?
Well, this was in high school. Korn came out when I was in high school. When I think I was a sophomore in high school, and it was a little more laid back about the music thing. There were metal kids and there were rap kids or whatever, you know. And I kind of fit in the middle, which Korn really helped a lot because it was like you could show rap people Korn and they'd be like, "Oh, they're cool, man. They look, you know, they look like kind of cool guys."
Yeah, they kind of look like rap dudes. Like they're very California looking to me. Like in a dingy way, but like very California-ish, you know? Like I think we talked about with Limp Bizkit, we sort of talked about how like everyone in the band was like a guy, you know? And like I remember specifically like I talked about Korn and just like how, like Monkey's the kind of like Kirk Hammett, like surfer, dreadlock, kind of like just chill guitar virtuoso guy. And then like Head's the quiet weirdo, Fieldy's the moron. Jonathan Davis is the weirdo, and David's the guy who like actively hated the music they were like. I feel like every new metal band has one guy in it who hated what they were doing. Yeah, and David is definitely the guy in Korn who hates
look at the guy. He was so handsome, like in the early days. I've been listening to I listened to a podcast with him on it today, and now he's like one of those guys that you can tell he looks like a YouTube video in a car guy. Now, like a guy
he always kind of looked like a car guy, like in the Got the Life video when he's the one who's like driving the car, I think, when they get out of the car, and you're like, yeah, he probably owns that car. Like he just looked like a guy who like worked out, like had a lifetime, like his thing with Korn was like, you know, we made a bunch of money, but like Gold's Gym gave me a lifetime membership, and that was like really cool. And then I also bought like 3 muscle cars And that's my whole thing.
Seeing the poster, I mean, I saw a poster of them when I went and bought the album, and that's what kind of solidified it for me. And they have this thing of like, they look like rock stars in a way that I could never look. I think like I always wonder how guys that end up being rock stars end up looking like they were born to do it in a way. Korn was born to look like that, which meant that they were definitely going to be rock stars. I was born to look like this, which meant I would do podcasts, you know, or like whatever job I would do. Right. I just didn't have the rock and roll guy look, you know?
Right. Well, I think it's the thing too that Korn had, especially like almost more than like Limp Bizkit and stuff like that, was that they had that rock star thing where they could kind of look and wear whatever they wanted and it seemed cool no matter what, you know, which was like that kind of thing. Like then maybe that's just me being like insecure, but I just feel like I never, when I buy clothes, I'm just like, oh, these all look okay. Like I'm never, you know, and if something looks a little outlandish, I'm like, well, this isn't for me, you know. Whereas like you look at like posters of Korn and like Jonathan Davis had like a mustache that he shaved down the middle and then wore those like really goofy like clear lens Oakleys all the time, and then like both Head and Monkey had like bizarre haircuts, and like Monkey had the kind of like boiler suit look going on, and then like David would wear like just baggy gym clothes and like baggy gym pants and like a wife beater. But he looked famous somehow. Like, even though he just dressed like a chud, you're like, this guy looks famous, kind of. Like, they had a weird vibe. And then P.O.D was always wearing like the baggiest possible clothes, and he played his bass at his shins. And you're like, this is just the coolest thing ever, you know? Like, I don't feel like, what were you dressing like when Korn came out? Like, what did you look like that you were like, these guys are dope?
I think when they came out, I was in, you know, I wish in ninth grade, I'll say this. In ninth grade, I was wearing like IOU jeans, which were basically like Nautica jeans. They were okay. You bought them at the Cool People store, and then at the mall.
And in Columbus, that's what the store was called. You guys just had very literal store names. Oh, I went to the Cool People store.
So I was buying silk shirts and Looney Tunes t-shirts and stuff.
Yeah.
But then the next year, when I got like really into Korn, it was Adidas and Jinko jeans and like band t-shirts and flannels. Right. And boots and shell toes. Like I completely poured myself into being into Korn. I think part of that was because I liked hip hop anyway. Like I was into that like style the whole time, but I don't know if I had the guts to do it until I saw metal guys doing it, and I was like, oh, I can do that too. I'll be a metal guy too, you know?
Right. Yeah. No, I get that. Like, so for me, when this album I came to much later. So like my history with this album is I got into Korn at Follow the Leader. Like I kind of got into new metal at Follow the Leader. So when this album came out, I was 9. So I don't think there were probably like a whole lot of 9-year-olds that were like listening to an album with a song called Faggot on it.
Yeah.
So like it wasn't really it wasn't really something that I would have listened to at that time. But then like Freak on a Leash came out, and that just felt commercial. Like, even though it just like the music wasn't really like, there's never been a time before or since where music like that was popular and famous. But at that time, like Freak on a Leash was so big. The video was so cool. I talked about this last episode. Like the cartoon video was so cool. The song was so cool. That got me into Korn. And then I specifically remember like, okay, I same as you, like right away, I don't know what it was about Korn, but right away there was just something that hooked me into the band where I was like, okay, this band is my shit. I like this now. Like before I was kind of like Weezer, Green Day, Blink-182, kind of like pop punk stuff. And then when I got into this, it was just like, this is it now. I don't like anything else. I only like this. And then I found Limp Bizkit through Korn. And then it was just like those two bands. And then, so I went back to this album, and it scared me, honestly. Like I was 13. I was like, you know, I I said when I was 13, I'm like, I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to do drugs. I'm not going to have sex. I'm just going to be a cool guy. Now we're 20 years later. I still have not done 2 of those 3 things. Like, you know, I was like kind of a scared kid. So I go back. So I remember specifically like just seeing the album cover for this. I was like, like this feels different than Follow the Leader, which was like a cartoon album cover, and the video was so popular and like people liked it. Girls liked it. People at school liked it. It didn't feel unsafe. And then I got this and it did not sound anything like Follow the Leader. And I was like, what is this? Like, I remember when I first got it, I liked some of the songs that had a little bit more vibe to them. You know, like I liked Blind and I liked Divine because that just had kind of like a sort of swing beat that to it. It had some urgency to it. But I remember like for the most part, I was like, I don't think I like this. Like, I think I like Follow the Leader, but I don't think I like this. So I actually kind of almost skipped this album and went to Life is Peachy. And then Life is Peachy has a couple more sort of, again, poppy is not really the way to describe anything, but like Adidas and Good God and No Place to Hide, like songs that felt a little bit more like they were trying to get on the radio. Whereas like this album doesn't have any of that. And so I remember like listening to it and being like, this is scary. Like, I can't get into this. And it was only like probably a year later or 2 years later where I actually like fully got into this record. And I was like, okay, no, this is actually super cool.
Yeah, I think we're so opposite, because when Follow the Leader came out, I was kind of like, this sucks, man. What are they doing? I mean, I ended up, I appreciated it when it came out, but it felt like I was trying harder to like Follow the Leader than I did the first 2 Korn out. Like that right. First album was, I'm not just talking about like how it got me into metal. It really made me care about music, period. Before it was like, hey, some guy at school said Nirvana's good. I'll give it a listen.
I guess I like them. Yeah,
I'd listen and be like, oh yeah, this is great. You know, so fun. But then,
so let me ask you this though. So did Follow the Leader, because we came to it at totally different times. Like, did Follow the Leader feel like they were selling out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It because the first 2 albums were, first of all, Ross Robinson, the kind of muddy sound that honestly, I wish they should remaster this thing.
This album sounds horrible.
Yeah.
It sounds like it was recorded on a Walkman.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds truly awful. And we're going to get into a news article later, but Ross Robinson basically admits that he didn't know what he was doing when he recorded this album. And it sounds like that.
Well, at the time though, it sounded very cool to me because everything
right.
else was really, clear. Everything else
right.
like more treble. This sounded like it had more bass and it was just more raw, and it was very cool. And like, I was seeing them in concert. I think I saw them like my first 9 concerts was seeing Korn. So when you see them live, the stuff is like a lot more crunchy. It's a lot louder, and you kind of have those memories in your mind when you're listening to it. I don't have them anymore. I did drugs for so long that I think they're all gone.
Drugs?
Well, I do drugs, and I just forget things now.
No, that's okay.
But I was also such a different kind of kid, you know. I smoked weed and did acid when I was 12, and like I already smoked cigarettes when I was 13 years old. Like, I was a fucking habitual smoker when I was 13 years old, and I was getting high and drinking and whatever I could get my hands on. Like, I just really wanted to be a bad kid. And Korn is music for bad kids. Like, that is exactly
right.
That's their target audience, is just bad kids, because they hate their parents and they hate authority and they hate everybody, and they think everybody's out to get them. That's why that first album spoke to me so much. It's probably the same feeling people get when they look at like Harley Quinn or Tweety Bird memes online, like when they're young and they're like, oh shit, yeah, that is sassy what they just said. Like, that's how I feel.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is it's so interesting because I would bet with your age and when you started listening to this, like, this would have felt like really, like you say, for the bad kids. And I feel like Follow the Leader was like Follow the Leader was like new metal emo almost. Like I talked about this on the last episode, but it was like, for me, it was more like I had a great life. Everything about my life was totally fine. Like I played rep sports that my parents poured thousands of dollars into. I always grew up in a comfortable home. My parents were together. They're still together. I have a great relationship with my entire family. And I'd listen to like one Korn song and be like, well, my life is awful. It's horrible. No one likes me or understands me. Jonathan Davis understands me and no one else understands me, you know? And it's like I can remember listening to Faggot. It sucks I have to keep saying that word, but I mean, it is the name of the song.
You
but
say
like
Faget, which is the way it's spelled.
There we go.
You know?
There we go. Okay, yeah, let's say that. That's much better to me. So Faget, I remember like listening to that and being like, and thinking to myself, like, yeah, this is me. I get bullied.
Bet kids think I'm gay.
I get bullied all the time, but I didn't really. Like I didn't either. I didn't have a ton of friends. Like I was always kind of a bit of a loner, and I moved too. Like when I was in grade 8, I moved across. Grew up in Toronto, in a suburb of Toronto, and I moved to a suburb of Vancouver when I was 14. So in grade 9, I moved, 9th grade for our American listeners. I know it's confusing switch, but so I moved. So I felt like I didn't have a lot of friends, but it wasn't like no one was actively bullying me. No one was calling me names in the hall. No, but yeah, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, everyone thinks that I am a loser and they hate me. And when Jonathan Davis says you can suck my dick and fucking like it, I was like, yeah.
See, it's weird because I think that is a good like fundamental difference between, because I ran with a pack of wolves, okay? like I was a bully, I've said before, obviously.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I was a redneck idiot, you know, but I was like kind of a bully, and I was sort of, you know, I don't like to say like I was a popular kid because it sounds weird, but like I was friends with everybody.
Sure, yeah.
And but the guys I hung out with we were mean to each other. We beat each other up and we were brutal. It really was like a pack of wolves. So like that first Korn album, like while I was not being picked on, I was still like constantly fighting for my life with this group of horrible people that I decided to put around myself, you know? Like I had put myself in this situation where like, oh, you're a bad, you know, like where I had to like kind of live up to a certain standard of badness and roughness and toughness and like I was probably the most tender-hearted of all of my friends, and that's exactly it. This Korn album was what, first of all, like the only emotion I knew how to have was anger, because I was always scared of like everything. I was like scared of all adults. I didn't like adults, which I think is a theme in a lot of Korn stuff.
Totally.
And it just was, I just hated people having authority over me. And the first Korn album is really about like somebody feeling trapped, like Jonathan Davis felt trapped, it seemed like, in his childhood. And that's how I always felt too. I mean, my home life wasn't terrible. I don't like my parents very much, and I don't love all of my brothers and sisters. But it wasn't like, I hate to make it sound like I wasn't in like an abusive house or anything. It was a real like, I don't give it, like, do whatever you're gonna fucking do, kid. You know, that was kind of my life, was like, just do whatever you're gonna do.
You had a good line on episode 1 where you talked about how like listening to this music like made you think that you hated your parents. Like you like, you know, where you'd listen to it and then you're like, oh yeah, like I do. Like Jonathan Davis would be singing about abuse, and even though you weren't getting abused, you're like, yeah, you know what? My parents kind of, I mean, they treat me bad too. And I feel like it was that way for me, but with like being like a loner or like an outcast. Like I feel like that was the part of the Korn music that like spoke to me, was the like, I had friends. It wasn't like I had no friends. I just didn't have a ton of friends. And I always felt like I was unpopular. Like my dread, like you said, you're always afraid, or you're angry because you're afraid. And I wasn't so much angry. It was more like sadness. It was like, I was afraid of getting too close to people, I think. And I wasn't like, it's hard to believe now because I'm very like extroverted, but I like was not very social. I didn't talk to a lot of people. So I feel like listening to this type of music almost exacerbated those feelings for me, where I was like, oh yeah, like I'm a huge loner, but like I'm listening to this music and someone like identifies with me, and like that's cool. And it was like almost like I propagated my own stereotype in my head of like I had this stereotypical idea like, oh yeah, I'm a loner piece of shit. And then I would like listen to Korn and walk around school and be like, yeah, all these people hate me, but like, I don't give a fuck. Cause like, whatever, I'm tough and I'm like a loner and I don't care. Like, it's fine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was a lot like we would get our grade cards every 9 weeks, and we would get an interim report every 4.5 or some shit like that. They would send them out. And most of the time, I would get to the mailbox before my parents and just throw them all away. I'd throw all my brothers and sisters away too. So it was just kind of like, shit, grade cards didn't come. That's weird, you know? But
they keep forgetting our address, I think. I don't know what's going on. Super strange.
But when they would get their hands on them, you know, they would ground me. And then I would go down in my room and slam the door and play this album really fucking loud because they made me, I was so mad that somebody had power over me. And I think my whole life has been pushing. I mean, my podcast is about how I hate authority, basically. It's like everything in my life has been, I don't want anybody to have any power over me. So I'm just going to act up. And that is this album. That seems to be the message of this album. It's like, nah, nobody will control me, and I will cry and I will scream until people realize that they just don't want to be around me at all.
Yeah, this is serious. You guys don't get this. And I think that's what it was for me too. Like I was 13 years old, and it was that kind of thing of like, my feelings are serious. Like this is serious shit. Like you don't understand. Like you don't understand how serious I am about this stuff. And like you and I grew up in an era where there wasn't, like mental health was not a conversation. You didn't talk to your parent. Like if I told my parents I was getting bullied, they'd probably be like, oh, like that's too bad. That sucks.
Why don't you
like
kick his ass?
You know? Yeah, exactly. You know, like it wasn't, you could never be like, oh, like I'm kind of sad, you know, like this is pretty shitty that I'm sad. You just didn't talk about that. So it was this kind of thing of like, oh, but my feelings are pretty serious. And I know that now because a guy was screaming on my stereo. So that's how I know.
There's also a thing about being a teenager where like your feelings do feel pretty serious and no adults take them seriously.
Totally.
You know?
Totally.
And that's difficult. I mean, I'm a 40-year-old man with a 15-year-old daughter now, and I find it very hard to take her feelings seriously. You know,
for sure.
I know what the issues are. You know, I know.
Yeah, Issues
everything
is Korn's
so real.
4th album.
Yeah, I know. Yes, I know.
That's what the issues are.
I know that everything seems very serious to her, but I just look at her and I'm like, you got a whole long life ahead of you, you know?
Yeah.
It's
for sure.
fine.
It's cause it's hard. Like it's so hard to impart perspective. Right. And like, I remember like, I've been teaching for 11 years now. And I remember, the first time these words came out of my mouth, where I had like grade 12 kids and they were like, oh, Mr. Cullen, like this is so hard. And I would be like, you think this is hard? Just wait till you get to university. Like you think this 500 word paper is hard? Like you're going to go to university in 4 months and they're going to give you a 1,500 word essay and they're not going to give you any help at all. I gave you a 500 word essay and I sat here and I taught you how to write every word of it. And and then I remember like getting in my car after work and I'm like, fuck.
Yeah, it was actually hard.
I'm that guy now. And then you have kids. They're like, Mr. Cullen, like 6 months later, who are like, you're so right. Like you told me grade 2. But at the moment, the kids are like, no, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. How could you tell me this isn't hard? This is the hardest assignment I've ever done in my life. Like everything feels like the biggest deal until you move on, and it's impossible to impart that. Let's talk about some of the songs, because I know you've been tweeting about some of them over the last few days as you've been listening to the album. One thing that I think I'm going to make a statement right now, and you can agree with me or not. I think, which is crazy because this is a crazy statement I'm about to make, but I actually think that this is the only non-Deftones new metal album where every song is good.
You know what? I kind of agree. Now, here's the problem, okay? Listen to it way too many times. Way too many in my life. Just I have like a thing about repeated doing things, you know. With music it's a little better. Like movies, right? I only watch every movie once. I would never watch a movie a second time.
Sure, I'm the same.
Just a ridiculous thing to watch a movie a second time or a TV show a second time. No, I'll never do that. With music, I go the other direction, and I will listen to the same music a million times and then hate it as soon as I'm done.
Right.
That being said, I like every song on this album. I could do without Chutes and Ladders. I think.
Okay. That's the one where you draw the line
with the album.
I don't, for me, Chutes and Ladders and Lies and Daddy, I think are the three that, you know, you could just be fine never hearing again. I mean, Daddy's kind of iconic, and obviously, like, I remember Daddy being iconic in the way of, you know, people being like, oh, Korn, like, isn't that the band that has the song where the lead singer cries for like 5 minutes? Like, people even knew about that, you know, because that was just, no one did that, you know, that wasn't a thing to just like have like, oh yeah, we just left the track playing while he like sobbed in the vocal booth for 4 minutes or whatever. But for me, those are like the three where you could go either way on. But I think it's more, I'm viewing it with a modern lens. Like, I'm with you. I listened to it so much when I was younger, but I was just surprised going back and listening to it over the last like week or so to get ready for this podcast. I was surprised how good the songs are. Like, yeah. I really thought that I was going to not hate, but I just haven't listened to it in a long time. So I really thought I just wasn't going to care for it, because I remember the production being so bad, and I'm a real stickler for good production. So I was kind of like, yeah, I remember the production being pretty bad. It's their first record. I don't think that I'm going to really like this. And like, man, I mean, it's really like wall to wall bangers. And the thing that really surprised me is when you get to the back half of the album, they were really like experimenting quite a bit. Like, it wasn't like it was just all go, 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 go. You know, obviously every song had like a monster riff, but you know, there are some really like in Fake, like the verse in Fake, where it like completely goes down to like a very sparse like guitar note, and David's playing like flams on the drums, and rolls, like subtle rolls on the drums, and just really like they had some really interesting parts on a lot of the tracks. Helmet in the Bush has the drum track. It just kind of sound like I was surprised at sort of the layers of the album. I just thought I was going to listen to it. It was going to be pretty sludgy. I was going to like maybe 3 or 4 songs, and I was going to be like, yeah, this album's aged poorly. But I think 25 years later, it's aged pretty good.
Yeah, the back half of the album is so good. Like, that's all my favorite songs on. I like Lies a lot. Like, yeah, was one of my favorite songs, because he says ripping your heart and destroying my brain, I think he says. But I love that. Here's another thing. Like, this is not to say, like, these songs are so special to me because I was there when this was all they played at their concerts. They didn't have any other songs. This was it. And then they would do a cover of Lowrider, and they would do Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock. That was it. That was the only other songs. They played everything except for Daddy. And it's funny you bring up Daddy, because the big rumor at Woodstock 99 was that Korn was going to play Daddy, and I was so excited to be able to tell people I got to see Daddy live, and then, you know, like, they didn't do it. So
right. Well, they ended up doing it on the 20-year anniversary tour, and Jonathan Davis talks about that in the article that we're going to read in a little bit. And he was just basically like, yeah, like, it was really emotional. Like, I guess what happened, the story is they played it one time in 1995, And Jonathan like kind of broke down again when they played it on stage, and he was just like, well, fuck that. I'm not going to like cry every show. And so then he was just like, yep, we just don't play it. And that's the rule. And then it just never got talked about. And then when they did the 20-year anniversary tour of the album, he was just like, yeah, like I'm over all that shit now. Like, I don't care. I can play it. It doesn't matter. And it's kind of like, okay, well, great. So then they just played it. They played it on the tour. Like, I would have rather him been like 20 years later, like, yeah, it still bugs me. Like, there's no way we're playing it. You know, just like keep it tight like that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many of these songs me and Brett went and saw him a couple years ago and they didn't play any of this stuff.
No, of course.
And
what would you play? You'd play Blind, maybe?
Yeah, they played Ball Tongue, I think, too.
Oh, really? Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's like that actually was, I don't know if it was in the interview that you sent me or if it was one I listened to, but they kind of felt like that song was the purest distillation of what Korn was up to that moment. And when you listen to it,
P.O.D says that in the interview.
Yeah, when you listen to it, it really is kind of like that is the foundation for what they would end up being. But these songs were all special to me. It was like because they all had these great parts in the mosh pit. And that's like really what I remember is like every single one of them had these really great parts in the pit, and I'll never fucking forget being in those pits back then, and these like really small places and fucking moshing to like Predictable, you know?
Right, which is so cool. Like, yeah, that's something that I can't even wrap my head around that. You know,
they were like skinheads at those shows, like
for sure,
because Korn was just like new. There was no audience. There wasn't like this audience of dudes in Adidas pants and stuff. It was like guys that like Motorhead and guys that liked rap music and guys, you know, it was like Rage Against the Machine fans. It was just all these different people were showing up because there was no scene.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine at like this album coming out at that time. Pardon me, and thinking like who's picking it up and liking it other than like those people that you mentioned, like kind of skinhead, like skid people in general, like, you know, because it's not really metal. It's almost not even new metal in the way that we kind of like think about new metal as this sort of like rap rock kind of like hybrid thing. Like it's not this. Korn did more of that later. This is kind of not really that. Like this is almost like a mix of like metal and grunge in some ways. Like it's funny that Korn talks in some of the interviews I read about how they were like trying to distance themselves from grunge, but I feel like in the way that it's recorded and like some of the tracks, like it does owe something to grunge, you know, and it's coming out in 94. So of course it's going to have some kind of influence on it. But it's hard for me to imagine someone hearing this, which probably sounded so different from everything, and being like, yeah, this is cool. Like, this is good. This is what I want, you know?
I mean, I think the thing that grabbed me first, the very first thing, I heard, you know, Blind was cool and everything, and I heard it, and I was like, listen to that song again. That's pretty fun, you know? But right after Blind, they go into this thing that kind of sounds like Cypress Hill. And I was like a huge Cypress Hill fan. So that is the thing that I could tie Korn to, right? Was like, I was looking at Korn as like, that's why I think I thought of them as rap rock in a way. Cause I remember saying like, telling my dad saying like, you know, every band out there right now owes a debt of gratitude to Pink Floyd and the Beatles. And I was like, not my favorite bands. They owe more to Cypress Hill and the great rappers of our time. Okay. And Pantera. So just, you shut your mouth, Dad.
I do feel like this album would totally have been a generational touchstone of something that like no parent would have liked this.
My dad hated
like there's
it.
Just of course, right? Like I mean that had to be part of the appeal in that, yeah, like if you were an older parent at the time that this album came out, like this is the exact type of music that I think people would conjure in their mind of like, yeah, my kids listen to this absolute garbage. I can't even understand how they like this.
It sounds so loud and muddy and just...
It sounds so muddy. Like there's nothing in it to grab onto, you know? Like I feel like when I was listening to like Green Day and Weezer and stuff like that. Like my parents didn't love that either, but there's enough to grab onto there where you can be like, okay, well, this is sort of influenced by like the Clash and the Ramones and like what, you know, people can kind of get that. And Weezer was sort of like the Cars and stuff like that. And another sort of like 80s pop. And this has none of that. There's nothing in here where if you're like a parent, you're like, well, I don't really love like all of this, but like that one part I kind of like. There's nothing, zero. And then of course like all the language that's in it, you know, there's tons of like homophobic slurs, and not even homophobic. Well, I guess they are homophobic slurs, even though Jonathan Davis was like, you know, lamenting that they were being yelled at him. And he even says in one of the interviews, he's like, yeah, the songs on the record where I talk about that, it's like, I never saw the big deal in like being gay. Like what if I was gay? Like who cares? You know, like I think that's what he's like trying to get at, but it's pretty abrasive to listen to in 2019, even where you hear some of the and not even the homophobic language. There's just so many like fucks and, you know, stuff. And you're just like, oh boy, like he has that one, what song is it? I think it might be Need To, where he's just like, fuck.
Yeah, I love that song. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, and you're like,
my parents. My dad hated it because, like, he was like, they can't even play their instruments, which is such a funny parent thing to say. Like, they can't even play, because that's like sort of the fundamental difference between me and him, is that he kind of likes that virtuoso stuff, and I hate it, and I hate people that can play their instruments. I think they stink. Like I mostly just listen to punk and this stuff. So this was like kind of mind blowing to me. And I just remember my dad hated the bass in this stuff.
Of course.
And that was like,
how could you not?
All I cared. That's what I loved. Like I was sort of like, I think Korn was really the gateway to get me into Primus too. I wanted to be a bass player for a period of time because I love the bass on these albums. I'd never heard a bass guitar, you know, I'd never picked it out above anything else in music until Korn. And then I was like, holy shit, you know, the bass is like the coolest instrument, you know?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And what I think is funny is I actually feel like they play really well. Like it's a funny thing to be like, these guys don't even know how to play their instruments. And it's like, oh, and who does? The Beatles? Yeah. Like they don't know, like they're playing like simple like chord progressions, Ringo Starr's like absolutely rudimentary drummer. Like obviously they wrote amazing songs.
Nursery rhyme ass shit. I'll say
yeah, I'm not trying to say I'm not trying to say that they're bad musicians, obviously, either, but it's like it's such a funny argument to be like, well, these guys don't even know how to play their instruments, and they're playing like extremely complicated like chord progressions. The drumming is insanely fast and difficult to play. Like, yeah, P.O.D is, I mean, well, I have a problem with his bass playing, but you know, like you said, it's like nothing else. No one else was really doing that aside from Les Claypool at the time. So it just like is such a weird thing to be like, oh, well, they don't even know how to play their instruments. It's like, well, I actually feel like this would be extremely hard to play for a lot of people. Like it's not easy.
Well, I'll say that P.O.D, I don't think he's like a great bass player or anything. I just like the way he just hits the thing. It's great. Right. It's great to watch. It's fun to watch. And I don't know. I think being able to hear the bass in the song is so cool, especially in metal, for sure. You know?
Yeah, no, I think so too. And P.O.D has an amazing quote in the interview we're about to read here, but we'll talk I want to talk a little bit more about Chutes and Ladders because it is so funny. Like that's the other thing too. I think you can really appreciate, and it was the same thing with Significant Other. When you're, you know, I mean, I was 13, 14, 15 listening to this album. Like I never thought about the lyrics ever. I'm just not a lyrics guy. We talked about that in the first episode. Like it just, whatever they said, I was like, cool. And Jonathan Davis like scats on this, and I would like scat along with him, you know, making up whatever he's saying, you know, whatever. I didn't give a shit. Like, and so it's just so funny now as a 33-year-old man to like look back and be like, yeah, they just had a song where it starts out with a minute and a half of bagpipes for some reason. And then because Jonathan Davis knows how to play them.
Yes.
So they're just like, okay, well, he knows how to play them. So we'll put them on here.
That was a huge deal live, though. In the early days,
sure.
In the very early days when they were playing these like dingy rock clubs, a guy coming out with bagpipes was fucking crazy.
Was it cool, or were people like, what is going on?
No, people loved it because he played Lowrider and they would play Jump Around with them, you know, with the little, you know, so it was cool. Everybody was super excited about it. And like, I remember telling my dad, I was like, this guy can play fucking bagpipes, man. What are you talking about? You know?
Yeah, but it's so weird. So it starts and then they basically recite nursery rhymes. And then that's the whole song essentially. And what I love is like some of the quotes about it are just so funny because Jonathan Davis literally says like, yeah, I just wrote this because it's crazy. Like when you look back on like nursery rhymes, like they're about some like dark stuff. Like they're like Baba Black Sheep is like racist and London Bridge is about the Black Plague. And like, these are some really dark things. And like, no one talks about it. I'm like, yeah, no one talks about it because no one cares. Yes. No one gives a shit. Like the chorus of the song is so funny where he's like, look at the words that cause all this evil. What evil? No one was reciting Baba Black Sheep. And then it was like, well, now we're all racist because we've been saying Baba Black. Like it was just such a weird, like how tripped out or whatever do you have to be sitting in the studio and be like, you know, have you guys ever thought about it? Like nursery rhymes are like pretty fucked up. Let's write a song about that. I mean, that's pretty fucked.
It's programming our brains when we're kids. It's making me racist over here.
All 6 dudes were just like, yep, that's like for sure. I mean, Jonathan Davis was 23 when they recorded the album. So like 23, you're like peak, like cool, you know, that's when you think you're like the coolest person on earth. You're like invincible. And he's just like probably high on meth in the studio. Like, man, these nursery rhymes are fucking dark.
Yeah.
Like, let's get in there. Can we talk about this? Not enough people are talking about this. And then Head's like, you're right, man. Why does no one talk about this? You should sing about it. Ross Robinson's like, yeah, could you play the bagpipes on this? I probably could. And then somehow we have this song. Like, it's so bad.
It's the worst song. I mean, it was really good in the pit back then. You know, like that was the knick-knack paddywhack. Like that was like
right when the song like breaks down where it's knick-knack paddywhack, give a dog a bomb.
That was where people went like absolutely ape shit because, you know, that was a lot of people's favorite song because a lot of people are idiots. You know, like it's just like,
especially those who listen to Korn.
So many people are dumb, just like Jonathan Davis, which sort of makes Chutes and Ladders a perfect song because there are also so many people that you would be like, some of these nursery rhymes are really dark, and they're like, word, yeah, I know, I heard that. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. Racism, you know, it's fucked up, you know, we gotta stop.
Why does the sheep have to be black? Why does it have to be black? Why can't it be purple? Why isn't it Baba Purple Sheep? Okay, this is crazy.
It's like nobody even it's hard for me to say because I guess like if you were a child of the 60s or whatever Jonathan Davis was, 70s, they probably did 70s, read nursery rhymes back then because that was like all there was, I guess. That was like the only books. But like now people don't even think about nursery rhymes.
No.
My kid's never heard a nursery rhyme unless she's been in the car when I played Chutes and Ladders, which just shows that Jonathan Davis is putting that darkness out in the world anyway. It's like,
yeah, exactly. That was the only way I knew the nursery rhymes. I was like, whoa, this has a really kind of cool sing-songy vibe to it. I wonder if they came up with this. Then I start looking up, whoa, these are racist. And he's talking about this. And a song earlier, he was saying Faget a bunch of times. I don't know about this Jonathan Davis guy. This is really something.
It's a fucking mess.
It is a really, like, it's funny when you start to dig into the songs as well, because basically every song on the album is about getting bullied or being insanely high on drugs. That's the only songs that there are. They named a song after how your dick gets small when you do meth. They're just like, yeah, Helmet in the Bush. That's what it looks like when I'm super high and I can't get it up.
Yeah, I didn't know that was what the song was about. You blew my fucking mind. Yeah, I never even thought about it.
Yeah,
Helmet in the Bush.
That's Here's the direct quote. Davis said that Helmet in the Bush is about meth. It's about when you do meth and you look down at your dick and it's literally a helmet in the bush.
Been there.
Basically, it's what happens when you do too much drugs and your girl want to get with you and you got some man problems down below. Just another reason not to do drugs, children, Fieldy elaborated.
Oh my God, they're so dumb.
They're so dumb. Well, let's get into how dumb they are. So every month, every time we look at an album, we're gonna pick up an article and read it, a crazy article. And normally we're going to try and focus on an article from that time period, but this came out in 94. The internet wasn't really around. So this is actually an oral history of the recording of the album, just before Korn did their 20-year anniversary tour in 2014. So this is from Rolling Stone in 2014, and it's an oral history from all 5 members of Korn and Ross Robinson, the producer, about the album. And just some truly absurd quotes in here. And the thing I love about it is we're 20 years past the making of this album, and some of the shit that they say is just truly absurd.
Yeah.
And I want to start with Fieldy. So we've talked about, I do think, pardon me, Fieldy might be one of the dumbest people on earth. Like, for Fieldy, if he did not get into this rock band, it was going to be a real problem for him in life. I'm not going to say what jobs he may or may not have had. They just weren't going to be good.
No.
I'll tell you that right now. And so his quote, this is literally the first thing he says in the oral history here in Rolling Stone. When I would want to slap my bass, I wanted it to sound like it was being slapped. I didn't want it to sound like a bass. I wanted it to sound like if you slapped a string. I don't even like bass, to tell you the truth. It makes me nauseous. This is in 2014. Fieldy. Bass makes me nauseous. The instrument I play that has made me filthy rich.
Yeah. I mean, it does. It can make you nauseous. It'll like make you feel a little bit weird sometimes if you get hit with it really hard, you know, with that really big bass, and you're like, ooh, God, it feels like my heart's beating weird now. And then you get freaked out and you got to go step out of the pit because you did too many drugs before you went to the concert.
So yeah, that was a really great way to kick it off, where Fieldy's just like, yeah, whatever. I wanted it to sound like I was hitting it. It's like, well,
I like that.
Guess what? If you hit it, that is what it sounds like.
I love that you can hear the strings clacking on the guitar. I that's like my favorite thing. I think that is one of the things that really drew me to Korn, was like hearing Fieldy's strings slap the guitar. It sounds like they're not even tuned or strung there. They just like are hanging there, and he's just whipping the guitar with them, and I love it.
Yeah, it was always funny to watch him play live, because it certainly does not look like he's playing the instrument properly. Like, that's where your dad would have an argument, where he's just like watching a Korn concert and Fieldy's just there like, and you're like, okay, well, this isn't anything. What is happening right now? He's not even doing the thing properly.
I mean, imagine if they needed somebody to play a real bass. They'd probably be in trouble, but they didn't. They just had him.
That's all they needed. My next favorite quote is from Ross Robinson, the producer. Pretty good. This is another great quote that just shows you how much everybody really knew what was going on when this was happening. Ross Robinson. I didn't know what the hell I was doing at all. Laughs. When I didn't know the answer to something, I would go to the bathroom and put my head on the floor and ask for help until I got this chill in my body. Then I would go out and have all the answers and know what to do.
I've been there. I kind of understand what he's getting at there a little bit. Like, there's been a lot of times where I've had to like just walk out of the room and be like, all right, I'm just out, and then come in and I'm able to do stuff. I mean, I wasn't doing technical stuff. I'm just doing content. So that's a little bit different thing. He probably should have read a manual or something instead of going in the bathroom and putting his head on the floor. But I get what he's putting out there.
I sort of get what he's putting out there, but it's just like a funny, like, he's obviously just trying to like be funny and be self-deprecating, but it's just a weird, like, yeah, all I had to do was I just put my head on the bathroom floor, and then I knew everything of what to do, and it was totally fine.
But the amount of money he was probably getting at the time, because they were signed,
totally.
You know, somebody was paying for that. They were just like, fuck it, you know, I'll whatever, do whatever you got to do, Ross Robinson.
Yeah, no, exactly. And they talk a lot about, you know, how he was really trying to like get vocal performances out of Jonathan Davis and everything like that. And he would just, you know, really push Jonathan's buttons and like get it going on. And then they have a whole great section where they talk about Ross Robinson trying to feed them wheatgrass shots, that he was like a super healthy guy. And he'd be like, okay, guys, I'll be honest. I saw last night you were doing a shit ton of meth. It'd probably be good if you took a shot of this wheatgrass. I think that would really clean everything. It's smart. It's really good because, yeah, they recorded this album in a house in the forest, apparently. And so I guess the label's whole plan was like, hey, we'll put Korn in the forest. They're going to go out. They're going to get this album done. There are no distractions. And then they're just like, yeah, we just invited people there every day and just had massive parties. And it like really didn't matter. It wasn't a problem. We just partied every minute.
Yeah. And I'll say this about the wheatgrass thing. When I'm on tour, and I'm just doing drugs and eating bad food for 10 days, you know, and smoking and just the worst human being possible on the road. Like on like the last 2 days, sometimes it'll just be like, let's go get a green smoothie today. Actually,
yeah, no, for sure.
Let's get our bodies back together, get it healthy again.
Just one smoothie and we're good. That's all you need, baby. One smoothie recharges the whole tank. It's all good.
So wheatgrass makes sense. I might do wheatgrass next time. David in that article says the wheatgrass made him go crazy, like he loved it.
Yeah, of course. And that's
he's
we're going to get to.
Though,
we're going to get to David. I know you hate David, and so this is a good quote from Jonathan.
I don't hate him now.
Okay, I thought you said you hated him.
A little bit. I hated him like a tiny bit.
Well, because Jonathan says, you know, I remember that moment. He's talking about recording Daddy. He's like, I remember that moment when I came out of there and I was fucking sobbing. My whole band was crying. They just all hugged me and shit. It was a crazy fucking experience. It was the good old days, dude. We were all a band of brothers. We were like the fucking Three Musketeers. Everybody was there for all their parts. Now we got families and shit and we're grown up and everybody comes and does their parts and leaves. But at that point, the whole band was there. Except for David. He was never there. He always did his parts and bailed.
Yeah. I mean, that is the thing. I don't think it doesn't seem like, I just listened to an hour interview with him and some guy from a band called Band of Wolves or some shit like that. I don't know what it was. It was a real weird podcast that wasn't very good. And David was just the least charismatic person I've ever heard on. I've had people on my podcast that were like impossible to talk to.
Yeah, but been there.
David seemed like the most impossible person to talk to in the whole world. And I just really felt for the host in that one. But
and it was just the host and David?
Yeah, it was just the host and David. The host was the lead singer of a band.
Oh, yeah. Because David seems like the guy who'd just be like, you know, he'd be like, so, you know, Korn, like you guys, you know, tell me about that recording experience or whatever. Like they could be talking about the album. Like, tell me about what it was like to record that. I'd be like, I don't know, it was good.
I'm not here to talk about Korn. That's
Did he
like
say
a real
that?
David move. No, he didn't do that, but it would have been fun because he knows he has to be there to talk about Korn now.
Well, he hasn't done anything since Korn. So what?
Okay, now let me just read this real quick from the article, which I cut out. Silvera, who left the group in 2006, won't be rejoining the band for the occasion, but he is currently working on getting a wider release for Echoes and Traces, the debut from his alt metal project Infinica. So he's doing great right now. He's got Infinica going. That album, it's funny because that album went triple platinum since this article was written, and that's all people are talking about right now.
Yeah, of course, Infinica, and everybody knows it and they love it. And I think people do think that when they listen to new metal, they're like, I really like Follow the Leader, but I just can't help but think that drummer's probably got some good ideas himself. I think he's being held back. I can hear the way he's playing the drums. And I mean, I'm a drummer, okay, and no, drummers should never have solo projects. That's nothing. That doesn't. Even Tommy Lee, he's like the most famous, like at least maybe not most famous, but most celebrity drummer of all. Even his solo project, people were like, no thanks.
Oh, you mean Methods of Mayhem, the album we'll definitely talk about on this show someday?
Correct. Yeah. Get Naked, baby. We have to talk about it.
Come on, baby, make it hot. It was he comes off like a massive dick. And like the more I listened to about him, the more it was just like, oh, fuck this guy, you know? Because I think what happened was we get to about 2006. The band's been going for like 12 years, and it's definitely on it seems they're on the down road.
I think they've been on the down road for some time in 2006.
Yeah. So
I mean, when did Untouchables come out? 2004? 2003?
Yeah, I can look. Yeah.
Because Untouchables felt like the last kind of time that people were aware of Korn.
Right. So he figured, I might as well just get out of here. This thing's going to turn into like a new metal nostalgia act, and they're just going to go around and do the things. But they like kind of pushed through and came out on the other end and made a few like good moves, made a few good albums, and ended up being a legendary band. And he wants back in. Like he so clearly wants back in. I read a couple of things where like so basically when him and Head were out of the band, he called Head like during the year that Head was out of the band, and he's like, hey man, we should try to get back in Korn again. Had to be the weirdest, like what a weird conversation to have. Like, hey man, let's try to get back into Korn again.
And Head's like, I can get back in at any time. Like they like me. It's no problem. I still see Monkey like every day. I could get back in anytime.
Right. I don't know what because then David is a prick and he goes like this. And then a year later, Head's back in the band, even after he said some pretty nasty things about the other guys to me on the phone that day. And it's like, okay, that's why I don't like you, man. He's an unlikable person.
Yeah, he's unlikable.
When he left Korn, he was like, I'm going to like either model or be a restaurateur. And it's like, oh, fuck you, man. Just go away forever. Nobody wants him back. Like, that's the funny thing. And then he sued them, and then they sued him. It's just incredible. He seems sleazy to me a little bit. Very dumb, which Korn hit when he was 20. So I can see that he probably never learned a single thing after that day.
Yeah, especially like playing the instrument where you just hit stuff. Yeah. I mean, Korn had two guys that just hit stuff, him and P.O.D, but they did great.
He probably hasn't like opened a book.
No.
Or like he probably doesn't watch the news. He probably doesn't go on the internet. He probably has no idea of anything except for this band he's in, which is
that he's not in anymore.
Well, no,
he's
probably still in a new one now.
Oh, right, yeah, but he's probably still collecting enough royalties too off of the old Korn.
They cut his ass off. They cut him off. So what happened was, this is great because I listened to some shitty YouTube person lay out this court case. What happened was he sued them for royalties on the new shit, right?
Oh, that he didn't even play on?
Yeah, but he's like, I made Korn, so I was there when we made Korn. And
that's hilarious.
So they were like, fine, we'll settle with you. They wrote up a contract and they settled with them. And this motherfucker went behind their back and tried to go to their publishing company and bill them for more money, which then ended up being a breach of contract. And they took him to court and they cut him off forever.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible.
It fucking rocks, man.
So you got to be so dumb. And the thing is, like, he's just not a good enough drummer. Like, you don't like in this genre, you don't have to be a standout drummer in nu metal. Like, I was just talking about this the other day with a friend of mine. Like, screamo was such an interesting genre because every record label decided that you had to have an absolute pistol of a drummer if you wanted to be a screamo band. And like every other like musical genre, it's not so, like, obviously metal have amazing drummers, but like for whatever reason there were so many screamo bands where you'd see them live And like the other four dudes all looked like you would expect screamo dudes to look like. And then the drummer would be like 6 years older and like clearly didn't care about anything, like wouldn't even really be like rocking out to the songs. They were just so smooth and steady and great players. For whatever reason, screamo, we decided, hey, we got to have a top level drummer or this band's not going to work. Nu metal did not require that, even though Limp Bizkit had one. John Otto's an unbelievably good drummer. But David, there's nothing about his playing where you're like, okay, we have to keep him in this band. Like there's just nothing. And it was really funny reading that Rolling Stone article. There was a section where Ross Robinson was talking about, he's like, I thought David's drumming was really critical to our success because he followed the vocals. Like he was like, you know, he would lock in on what Jonathan was doing and would play along to the vocals. And so it gave Korn a different sound. And I was like, well, first of all, that's just simply not true. You just can't play drums along to vocals. That just isn't true. Second of all, if he was playing to the vocals, it's because playing to Fieldy was impossible. Because Fieldy's doing shit that makes no sense. Like usually a rhythm section is a rhythm section. Fieldy had no rhythm whatsoever. Like we said, he just was hitting the guitar and hoping for the best.
Yeah, I love it.
So yeah, of course, it's fine. But you're just, as a drummer, you have nothing. So he was like, I mean, he was getting into the pocket of these songs, but it was way more based on the guitar riffs. To say like, oh man, he just followed the vocals and that's what made him so special. It's like, no, fuck off. That doesn't even make sense. What are you talking about? Anyone can play David's parts on any of the albums. There's nothing special about him as a drummer. So for him to be like, I made Korn and I'm the guy. I mean, it's just hilarious.
Well, that was another interesting thing on the interview I listened to with him today was the dude that's interviewing was like, man, brother, you had 2 restaurants. You were a model. It's like, are you just a guy with a mind for the business? And he was like, yeah. You know, when we got our first record deal offers, I was the one that picked which one we were going to do. And I was like, God damn. Like, he just feels pathetic like in a weird way. Like maybe he was, maybe they said, hey, David, you know, which one of these record deals do you want to take? But I bet you they were all like, they were saying, you are a guy in the band. Why not give your input? Not you're solely deciding which label we sign with.
Yeah, right.
I also remember a funny story about David is that like, I really, when I was 15, 16 years old, I like really cared about autographs. It was a very weird. I guess all kids do, you know, it's like a weird thing.
Kid. Yeah. Totally, 100%.
But like I got Jonathan Davis's autograph, and I got.
Oh, did he sign it? HIV?
Yeah, I have it. I think I still have it downstairs. Yes, he signed it HIV.
Amazing.
And I got Fieldy's, and incidentally, I gave Stephen Carpenter a cigarette, and he signed my pack of cigarettes, but I don't have it anymore.
That's awesome.
But like David, at one point, we were seeing him live. And David was walking into a place called Savage Tan, which was a tanning salon. And because I saw him walking into his tanning salon, I was like, I don't want his fucking autograph. I don't give a shit. You know? Because I was just like some hillbilly kid. I was like, dudes don't tan. What's wrong with you, man?
He had to look good in those wife beaters, baby.
Right. There was something. Maybe it was also everybody had good names. John Davis isn't very cool, but Jonathan Davis is very cool. And he went by Jonathan, you know, and Monkey, Head, Fieldy. And then he was just David. It was just like, whatever. Dude.
You just imagine them like introducing themselves like, hey, I'm Jonathan. Hey, Fieldy. Hey, I'm Head. Hey, I'm Monkey. Hey, I'm Dave.
Well, that was another thing I wanted to bring up about the interviews. So I'm listening to this interview, right? And they're all cutting up. They're having the best time. Felt so bad for the interviewer. They were not respectful of the interviewer's time at all, and they did not give a shit about the interviewer.
Is this a recent one or from around this time?
Oh, this is Family Values tour time.
Okay, so 98.
So when they like launched Family Values, it was after the first tour, right?
Okay.
And he's asking them all these questions and then asking them to rephrase the question and answer, which I hate when people do, because we've had to do stuff like this. But I actually respect the person who's doing the interview, and I like do what they ask me to do, and I answer the questions in a respectful way because I'm not an asshole. And they kind of wouldn't do that. But there was this part where they were all, so they asked, what was the coolest part of this tour? And everybody in the band, you know, starts talking. Oh, you know, man, there was this night, it was Halloween night. We all dressed like hair metal guys, and we like did a hair metal thing, and it was so fun. And we did all the moves and the solos and stuff like that. It was like the best night. And while they're talking, not even after they're talking, they're all talking at the same time about it. And David is sitting sort of in the front, and he's going like this. I thought it was really neat when we got to perform Children of the Corn with Ice Cube. And it was just like, you don't have anything to do with these people. Like, they don't even like you. You're like fucking talking about one thing. Everybody else had like this great moment, and you're like, you had
like, actually no, this was cooler.
Great moment than everybody else. That should show you something about yourself, David.
He was in NWA, and I don't know if you guys know that, but like they were like a pretty big rap group, and like it's cool.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what they do talk about recording with Ice Cube, and P.O.D feels comfortable dropping the N-bomb, but
good. Of course he does. I mean, like that is the least surprising news to me.
It was the respectful way of saying it, but it was still kind of like, God damn, dude, come on. You're not allowed to say that.
But he would, like, I think that Fieldy thinks that he can. Like, I think that he's like, I legitimately think he's thought about it and been like, it's fine if I say this. Like, Ice Cube's my friend. It's cool.
It's also funny because the interviewer was like, was there any racial tension at this thing? And they're like, no, shut up. No, they love us. If they hated white people, they wouldn't have us there. And I was like, okay, guys. This is all so weird to me.
It was cool. It was just me and a bunch of my ends hanging out. Just like racial tension. What are you talking about?
Well, he said, I'm going to be clear. He said they got drunk. He said, they got me all drunk on Hennessy and they got me all high. And then they started saying, this ends crazy. But he like said it, he was referring to himself. I think he felt like it was okay. But again, This is the band that also sang Faget, where they also felt okay just yelling that. Yeah. And they still feel okay saying
it's, so, you know, it's problematic.
That's the guys, you know, hey, I'm a problematic guy too. That's the kind of guy I am. I'm doing a show on Shock Jocks. I'm fine with problematic. I find them to be like, it's weird. I have always wanted to meet them like my whole life and just tell them like, you know, you really helped me through some dark times, even though I don't think they like really helped me through any dark times. I don't think I've ever had any truly dark times.
Right.
Where I was listening to Korn.
Likewise. Like, no one has.
And maybe my darkest times, I probably listened to OK Computer or the Mars Volta. Those were kind of my dark time stuff.
Sure.
But you guys, you know, I would still tell them that they helped me through dark times, of course. But now, after watching like a few interviews and listening to them, and also just listening to the first album, I don't think I want to meet the guys, man. I would rather just like have in my mind that they're extremely cool guys because, like, you know, I got a picture in my phone of Jonathan Davis holding Pickle Rick in his hand, and it's just, I can't. I don't want them to ruin this for me.
No, that's fair. They definitely seem like the type of guys that, like, if you know them, they're probably fun to be around and they're like cool. But if you don't know them, they think you're a piece of shit.
Yeah, they're probably grating as hell. I did find out that House of Pain and Biohazard treated them poorly.
Yeah,
on that
saw
tour
that too, yeah.
In that article. And guess who says that? David, the guy that nobody likes, is probably just because they
thought he was a narc or
bad.
something. Yeah, exactly. Everyone treated him badly, and he's like, wow, they were really mean to me. Why is every band we play with mean to me?
They probably were like nice to everybody else in the band, but he would come in the room and they'd be like, "Get the fuck out of here, man! You're stupid. I hate you."
It got so bad for David that he started to think that Faget was about him.
Yeah,
it like propagated in his own. He's like, I'm getting bullied a lot. This is actually, I'm really feeling this when we play it.
he deserves it though. That's my feeling.